What's up everyone, I'm Dave Mech and welcome to this Solar 42F deep dive. Alright, let's begin. The Solar 42F by Alta Music is a pretty incredible instrument if you look at it. Just by looking at it, you can see that this is something quite special. The amount of knobs and controls and is in itself pretty crazy. And then if you start looking at the standard building blocks of a synthesizer, you can immediately see that this is not a standard synthesizer. I won't cover everything in this video because there's simply too much. But this is sort of a rundown that I'm now going through. But this video is really a deep dive into the sound and experimentation of this machine. And all the while I'm just creating sound, I'm gonna, of course, explain stuff about it. So the first thing I would look for when looking at the synthesizer is, okay, what are the oscillators, right? Well, we got 4 complex oscillators here. It's better to think of these as voices. And each voice has 5 oscillators that we can tune individually. And then we have this awesome weird dome, which is a light sensor, which I'll show you later, of course. Then we have 2 more drone voices right here, which are also interesting because they have a dedicated LFO and also a lot of controls and a noise generator, as you can see. Then we have 2 VCOs that are mostly being used by the keyboard. And then we have 2 LFOs, one of which is faster than the other. Also have 2 sample and hold generators, which is quite nice. We have a joystick that we can send out to anything. So you can also see that there are a lot of patch points available. We have a 5-step sequencer, which is apparently kind of Buchla style. Now, I personally don't have that much experience with Buchla, but it's an interesting sequencer for sure. We have also a preamp, which is really cool because actually this is it's a contact mic. So we can send out any of these sounds just by touching the synthesizer. We get all kinds of interesting rhythmic sounds. You can also plug in an external source, and the gain boost is quite crazy. It's 48 dB, so you can set it super loud. And currently I'm using headphones, but if you're playing on monitor speakers, you can actually make this thing self-resonate and create all kinds of feedback drones. It's pretty wild. We also have an envelope follower right here, which is taking its source from, as you can see, this preamp, the contact mic currently, or an external source. Then we have a mixer section for each of the drone voices, the preamp, the VCOs, and external audio. So there's external audio input here that we can also feed into this. We have triggers by which we can trigger voice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We of course have this nice touch keyboard, which also is pressure sensitive, but it's not pressure sensitive as in real pressure. It looks at the amount of surface that's covered by your finger. So if you press harder, you cover a larger surface, and by that there's more pressure. It's pretty clever. And yeah, but with these patch points you can patch, for instance, pressure this one out to anything to modulate that. Pretty cool. This keyboard is also a sequencer, 16-step sequencer if we want, which we can program with this. What we have, of course, is this main section, which has a cartridge, which contains an effect algorithm with 3 different algorithms on that one cartridge. And you get quite a few of these cartridges, the synth, as well as a couple of patch cables, so you can start patching. But I can really recommend getting some extra patch cables. And currently I have the Infinity, which it's basically the default. I think it ships with this already in it. Here we have 3 controls for the effects. And we have a master volume and a blend for dry and wet for this effect. 2 filters that we can either link for the left and the right channel. Right, so that's sort of a good thing to realize about this machine is that we have a left and a right channel, and the effects algorithms are treating these left and right channels separately. So that's what the left and the right channel, we can have different effects on that, for instance, and we can unlink the filters and create all kinds of interesting stereo effects. Each of the voices has a hold button, so we can activate it and keep it steady, droning, right? So I'm gonna start with the first voices right here. Each of these 4 voices has 5 oscillators, which we can mute with these buttons. And each oscillator of these voices actually sounds quite nice on itself. We can activate the light sensor for these. So currently I only have this one unmuted. And with these mod buttons I can activate the light sensor. Since this is already quite high, as you can see, I'm gonna start with this voice. This oscillator rather, and now activate the light sensor modulation. Now, the cool thing is that I can also, for example, I have a light automation in my studio. And now if I turn off the headlight, I can just have this automation play the pitch of this oscillator. Using 2 oscillators and a bucket of reverb. Cool, right? Now, another thing that we can do is actually patch CV into that voice, and this will start, as you can see, modulating the light sensor. So, as you can see, that I can now control this with the LFO and turn the light back on. So we can actually see what's happening. There we go. And with the CV knob, you can attenuate that. But it can't go to 0. So there's also always a bit of modulation when you put a signal into this. And then we have this volt knob, which lowers the voltage of this voice. After 12 o'clock, these oscillators start frequency modulating each other, creating very wild results, really. Okay, so that's those 4 voices, and remember, this is just one of them. We have 3 more of them, which is pretty crazy. Let's see what happens when I add these other 3 voices. So let's bring in this first voice. Cool. Now let's add this second voice. Press hold. The drone. You can hear. This is that voice. And you can hear how nice. It's a beautiful sound. Very live. Imperfect, and that's what makes it so nice. So let's bring in that other voice. Let's pan this a little bit to each side, and now let's bring in the third voice. Press hold. Tune it a little bit. These two oscillators I'm using currently. I'm gonna mute this. You can tune it. They're not super stable. Definitely helps to have this machine on for 20 minutes or so, but still they can go out of tune a little bit, so you have to sometimes tune them a little bit, but it's also kind of part of the experience, where things sort of start drifting out of tune and things start happening. Fifth voice, let's bring that in. And as you can see, I've turned up the volt here quite a bit, so this is another sort of noise. Tune that a little bit. I like that it's really microtonal, so you can really play with things being detuned. You get these awesome layers of sound. Set this a little bit. These are pan knobs. You can pan it into the stereo spectrum. Now let's see how beautiful the filter is. Set it to link mode. Slowly turning it down. And that's kind of the thing that I like about this mixer. Once you get into the flow with it, that I like about this instrument, I should say, is when you get into the flow, then you can really find all these small knob movements and really start zoning in on those. So it's really meditative to really change things in very subtle, small ways. Let's listen to this filter. Decay time of the Infinity Reverb's first algorithm. If you set it higher, it will go into self-oscillation and will become louder until it eventually starts to clip a little bit. I can show you that. Really go crazy. There's no safety built in, which is fine to me because I like to see where I hit the ceiling. But if you leave it at a little over 3 o'clock, it sort of keeps going. You can do stuff like this. Switch to bandpass. also unlink the filters so that you can create some nice stereo effect. Now I can, for example, take this LFO and plug it into the CV for the filter frequency, start modulating these filters, set them to slightly different settings, and start modulating that a little bit. Switch back to the low pass. There you go. The effects section, I can also set different effects per channel. And this is where things become a bit quirky, but once you get the hang of it, it's not that difficult to understand. You have this channel switch. You select which channel's effect you want to either change or reset. So if it's out, I can change the algorithm of the left channel, like so. And it will immediately switch to that as such. A third algorithm. Or back to the first. But if I leave this up and now change this one, the effect will go off. It's kind of good to know. But then I can press it in and now I can select a different effect again. And it will go back on, or I can change, press reset, back on again. And you can also mute the effect. Is a bit more unhinged. In the manual, you can find what each of these knobs do per effect algorithm. It's a bit much to go over. It's also nice to just tweak them and not really think about exactly what they do. But if you want, there's an overview in the manual. Well, I hope that gave you a good idea of these 4 voices and how deep you can go with them by just droning out and having some fun with some little automation, writing the filters, the mixer section, the effects, and the volt knobs. Glad I'm recording this because this is actually, I love it. It's nice. Let's have a look at voices 3 and 6. So I'm gonna actually add them. Add this one first and turn these off. The other, well, actually this one is still on. Ooh, that's actually quite nice. Let's roll with that. Open the filter up, just to let you hear clean voice. There's a noise generator, which is also used to generate the sample and hold. It has both FM and AM, frequency modulation and amplitude modulation. It has, for that, it uses an LFO, which can be set to a slow and a fast rate by this with this switch. And we can also change the range of the oscillator, the tonal oscillator that we hear. But I currently have FM pressed in and AM pressed out. And I think this, I don't know, this is a bit weird. I don't think this is how it should be. Maybe only my unit has this problem. It's not a big deal. Once you know, but it can throw you off a little bit. So FM pressed in, AM pressed out means clean voice. No frequency modulation, no amplitude modulation. Now I depress FM, and now I introduce frequency modulation. And there's this modulation depth, and divider is basically sort of a crossfade between the LFO and the oscillator. You can really hear the frequency modulation. This is actually quite nice. Cool. Press inward the AM. We also get amplitude modulation. Can get some very nice tones out of it. That brings me to another quirky thing. But again, this is one of those things that you will get used to. But actually, when a knob is pushed upward, some things are turned on. I guess this relates to the mute thing. So these are mute switches. So currently the AM is muted when I press this inward. And when I depress it, it's unmuted. So it's on. And this goes for a lot of stuff. Like now link is off. Link is on. So yeah, unmutes where maybe this is sort of the exception. So these buttons, it's really good to sort of get to know them, because the hold, for instance, is when I press it in, hold is on. This is a bit of a workflow thing that you need to get used to, but it's not difficult to remember. Not really something that can stop me from zoning out. Sample and hold. It's pretty cool. So we're gonna get a gate out of this sequencer, 5-step sequencer, only turning on one gate to clock this sample and hold. Then I'm gonna take the sample and hold out. So let's have it change this. Add another gate. I also like to modulate the filter with sample and hold. Switch to the delay on this thing. So I'm syncing the delay time as much as I can with the sample and hold. Switching to bandpass. Let's add some distortion. And now try and bring the other voices back in. Another thing that you can do is get some stackables, which will come in quite handy. If I want to take this same sample and hold and duplicate it, for instance, I can do so by lengthening this cable, but also bring it into something else. So I'm going to plug this into the CV in of the filter and then route it to the gate input of this voice. And now we'll get triggered. Bit of LFO action to this, to, let's say, CV ins of those voices. Also route this to something else, like CV in of voice, for instance. Now let's try a different effect. A cathedral, this one. You can just put it in and the other effect will stay active until we switch. And I can just press it out. Set this to the third algorithm, which I really like because it has this resonant filter kind of thing going on. Note that we also have a headphone out here. So yes, I did use this on the couch on multiple occasions. And just immerse myself in this wonderful sound design dream of a machine. So these two voices are almost the same. They have standard waveforms, also some other shapes, morphing waveforms basically. Saw to inverted saw and sine to triangle. So there are 6 waveforms total. They're pretty much the same, except that oscillator B has a post VCA output, so it's a dry output that you could run through some external effects and then have come back through the external audio, which is pretty cool. And this one has a sync input, which is also quite cool. The output from voice A is normalized to the CV input jack of the VCO B, which can be adjusted with the CV amount. Turn all these down, and let's explore these 2 voices then. Let's switch these back to low pass. There we go. Sine wave to triangle, and in between very saw pulse-ish. And of course we can modulate this with modulation. Let's also include this keyboard and try and see what we can do with pressure. So if I set pressure to modulate VCA, you can already hear it's not really pressure, it is surface related. So the more surface is covered, the louder it becomes in this case. So that's how pressure is. Okay, I don't have to even press harder. I could just cover more surface with my finger. And yeah, I am drowning this synth in effects, but that's also because these effects are really beautiful, I think. And it just really fits the vibe of the synth. It's just, it wants to be drowned in effects. You want to hear a raw oscillator, and here you go. This is the morphing. Pulse. With modulation, sine wave, it can actually sound quite fat. We listen to the pulse. also has a sub oscillator. So let's bring back the effects. The keyboard can be set in different scales. You can also change the keyboard mode to arpeggiator. You can turn hold on and off. You can turn up the clock. Like this sine wave morphing. We can change the direction. You can change variations, which basically means that it goes up octaves. Change the variation interval, which is also pretty interesting. We can change the rhythm, which I really like, because we can turn off some steps, for instance. We can change the length, pulse output, portamento. Change legato, vibrato. So you can add a lot of vibe. Of course, there's also a hold knob. I'm going a little bit from the voices to the keyboards and back, but it's also because I kind of like to go with this flow where I'm creating and explaining at the same time. It's also something that I do in my courses, by the way, but a bit more structured than this, of course. But I'm vibing, I'm feeling it. This keyboard, we're not really done with the keyboard yet, but I'm not going to show you every single option that it has, but it also has a sequencer built in with 16 steps. Which is quite nice. But actually we're sort of using it already as a sequencer, but then yeah, you have to program in the notes with this little screen and this push button. It's not that bad actually, it works quite well. It is a bit fiddly, of course, compared to everything else that's going on with this thing, but it is a nice option to have. You don't have to use it, but you may use it. A little bit of attack, and we can change the envelope to looping, which is great. This is just one of those VCOs. So let's add another one. There's CV amount here, right? So we can actually frequency modulate this. And it's already doing that currently. VCO A is modulating the frequency of VCO B. And we can switch between exponential and linear. And you can really see that this synth is a gift that keeps on giving. Even if you don't have to use all the voices at the same time. You can just go to town with these two and have them interact with each other in interesting ways. So this is high mode, plus 3 octaves. Or keep it low. And we can add a sub, some pulse. The cool thing about this algorithm is it's either big or bigger. There's no short decay time, it's just massive. But I do really like this algorithm. It's the algorithm 3 of the Cathedral cartridge. This thing really is alive, I'd say. Cool. Now let's use this and grab another cartridge. This is another one that I really like. Can go out of hand really fast, but I do really like it. I'm gonna set this knob upwards, change this one, press down, change that one, and now bring it in. Back. So this is the Magic cartridge. Things become really magical quite fast. We have a clock input and a reset input for the sequencer and that sort of thing. We have a trigger output. We have a clock output as well. And this is a... Let's have a look. Let's put this into the CV input. Actually, FMing this VCO with the sequence itself, the arpeggiator itself, with this output. So this is CV out from the keyboard. I like it. So you can see this thing is not just a drone synthesizer, it's a experiment machine. I currently feel like a scientist. Searching for the sound that correlates to 42. Actually going to switch back to the Cathedral, but yeah, that Magic cartridge is super interesting as well. I like it. And yeah, like I said, there are many more cartridges. As you can see, there's quite a few. So, enough to explore. Cathedral. And actually, third. Yeah, this is just such a beautiful algorithm. That resonant fill there. This was cool. This sort of showed you the amount of fun you can have with this synth. I'm gonna plug in the joystick. Almost forgot about that one. Close this video off, I want to show you the thing that happens when I turn this on to the monitor speakers and start adding that contact microphone, which will start to resonate because of the loudness from my speakers. So I'm gonna mute my voice and wish you a wonderful day. And also want to mention that if you're interested in courses, sounds, like presets and samples, cheat sheets and that sort of thing, check out my website davemac.live/shop. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified when a new video arrives. And now I'm gonna mute myself and shut up.
Yes, this is cool.